Captain Jake Harrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he walked through the narrow halls of the mining ship Reliance. The air recyclers were working overtime again, and the whole ship smelled like metal and old socks. It had been 6 long months since they arrived at the 442 asteroid belt, and Jake was tired of looking at nothing but rocks and stars. The Reliance was not a pretty ship. Her hull was scratched and dented from years of hard work. Paint peeled off her walls, and her engines made strange noises that worried Jake more each day. But she was home to 43 humans who had nowhere else to go. The galaxy was not kind to humans these days. Jake stopped at the bridge where Lieutenant Amy Davis sat at her station. Amy was young, maybe 25, with short brown hair and eyes that never seemed to rest. She was the best communications officer Jake had ever worked with, even if she did drink too much coffee. "Anything interesting today, Amy?" Jake asked, settling into his captain's chair. The chair was old and comfortable, worn smooth by years of use. "Same old stuff, Captain," Amy said without looking up from her screens. "The usual chatter from the mining stations. Oh, and the consortium wants to know why we're behind on our quotas again." Jake made a face. The Galactic Trade Consortium paid them barely enough to keep the ship running. They wanted more minerals for less money every year. "Tell them the asteroids don't care about their schedules," he said. Amy smiled. "I'll put it in nicer words." Jake was about to reply when Amy's face changed. She pressed her hand to her earpiece and leaned forward. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange. It's a distress signal." "From where?" "Edge of the belt. It's weak, but it's definitely there." Amy's fingers danced over her controls. "The signal is using codes." Jake sat up. They were one of the most powerful races in the galaxy. They were tall, proud warriors with blue-gray skin and fierce eyes. Their ships were fast and deadly. What would a ship be doing out here? "Can you clean up the signal?" Jake asked. Amy worked for several minutes, her face tight with concentration. Finally, the bridge speakers crackled to life. The voice that came through was weak and filled with pain. "This is commander of the vessel. We are badly damaged and drifting. Life support failing. 12 crew members aboard, please. Anyone who hears this. We need help." Jake looked around the bridge. His other officers had gathered when they heard the transmission. Chief Engineer Pete, a big man with gray hair and oil-stained hands, shook his head. "Captain, that signal is coming from 3 hours away at full speed. Even if we go now, we might not make it in time." "And we're low on fuel," added Navigation Officer Carol White. She was a thin woman with sharp features who always worried about numbers. "If we use fuel for a rescue, we might not have enough to get home." Jake stood up and walked to the forward window. Outside, the asteroid belt stretched in all directions. Chunks of rock drifted slowly through space, some as big as buildings, others no larger than a car. It was beautiful in its own way, but it was also empty and cold. The distress signal played again. Commander's voice was getting weaker. "How long do they have?" Jake asked. Amy checked her instruments. "Based on the signal, maybe 6 hours before their life support fails completely." Jake closed his eyes and thought. The consortium would be angry if they used company fuel for a rescue. They might even fire the whole crew. And Pete was right. They might not have enough fuel to get home themselves. But Jake remembered being a young officer on a transport ship that had broken down in empty space. He remembered the fear, the cold that seemed to creep into your bones when you knew you might die alone in the dark. Another ship had saved them that day. The captain had risked his career and his crew to help strangers. "Pete, how much fuel do we really have?" Jake asked. Pete scratched his gray beard. "If we're careful, we might make it there and back, but it'll be close, Captain, real close." Jake nodded. He turned to face his crew. These people had followed him for 3 years. They trusted him to make the right choices. Some of them had families back on Earth. Others, like Amy, had nothing but this ship and each other. "I won't order anyone to do this," Jake said. "This is dangerous. We might not make it back, but there are 12 people out there who will die if we don't try." Carol spoke first. "They have never helped humans before. Why should we risk our lives for them?" "Because it's the right thing to do," Amy said quietly. "Because they're people just like us." Pete nodded slowly. "The engines can handle it, Captain. She's old, but she's tough." One by one, the other crew members agreed. Jake felt proud of them, even as he worried about what might happen. "All right then," Jake said. "Amy, send a reply. Tell Commander that help is coming. Pete, get the engines ready for full speed. Carol, plot the fastest course you can, and everyone else prepare for a rescue operation." The Reliance turned away from the asteroid field and headed into empty space. Her engines burned bright blue as she pushed toward the edge of the belt. Behind them, the mining operation they were supposed to be running grew smaller and smaller. Jake stayed on the bridge as they traveled. The hours seemed to crawl by. Amy kept trying to contact them, but the signals were getting weaker. Pete reported that the engines were holding up, but they were using fuel fast. Finally, Carol called out, "There she is, Captain." On the main screen, a ship appeared. It was beautiful, even damaged. Her hull was smooth and curved like a work of art, but Jake could see the holes where weapons had torn through her armor. One whole section was dark, probably without power. "Amy, try to raise them," Jake ordered. After a moment, Commander's voice came through the speakers. He sounded very weak now. "Unknown vessel, this is, you came. I did not think anyone would come." "This is Captain Jake Harrison of the human ship Reliance," Jake replied. "We're here to help. Can you move your people to airlocks?" "Some of them, others are too badly hurt. Our medical bay was destroyed in the attack." Jake looked at Pete. "Can we dock with them?" Pete studied the alien ship on his screens. "It won't be easy, but I think so. Their docking port looks similar to ours." The next few hours were the longest of Jake's life. His crew worked like they had never worked before. They moved the wounded to the Reliance's small medical bay. Dr. Hayes, the ship's doctor, did her best to treat injuries she had never seen before. They were tall and strong, but they looked so fragile lying on the medical beds. Their blue-gray skin had turned pale and their breathing was shallow. Commander was the worst. He had been hurt defending his crew, and blood seeped through the bandages on his chest. Pete and his engineers worked to fix this life support. It was hard because technology was different from human systems, but slowly they got the ship's air working again. When Commander finally woke up, he looked around the human medical bay with confusion. His eyes were golden, like a cat's, and they seemed to glow in the dim light. "You saved us," he said in a voice like distant thunder. "Humans saved." Jake was sitting beside the medical bed. "Just doing what anyone would do," he said. Tried to sit up, but he was too weak. "No, this is not something anyone would do. Your people risk their lives for strangers, for aliens who have never shown you kindness." "That doesn't matter," Jake said. "People are people. We don't leave anyone to die in space." Stared at Jake for a long moment. Then he spoke words in his own language, words that sounded like a promise and a prayer all at once. "What did you say?" Jake asked. "I said that blood debt is life debt. It is an old oath among my people. You have saved our lives, Captain Harrison. This debt will be remembered." Jake waved his hand. "You don't owe us anything, Commander. Just get your people home safe." But's golden eyes never left Jake's face. "You do not understand, human. When a swears a blood debt, it is sacred. My life, my honor, my family's honor, all of it belongs to you now until this debt is paid." 2 days later, the repairs were complete enough for the journey home. The crew had recovered enough to travel. Commander stood tall again, though Jake could see he was still in pain. "Thank you, Captain Harrison," said as he prepared to leave. "This will not be forgotten." Jake shook the alien commander's hand. Skin was warm and rough like leather. "Safe travels, Commander. Take care of your people." The pulled away from the Reliance and disappeared into hyperspace. Jake watched it go, then turned back to his own problems. They had barely enough fuel to make it home. The consortium would want to know why they were behind on their mining quotas. Life would go back to normal. But Jake was wrong. Nothing would ever be normal again. 2 years had passed since Jake Harrison rescued Commander and his crew. Jake was no longer captain of a mining ship. He now commanded a patrol vessel called the Guardian, protecting human trade routes from pirates and raiders. The pay was better, but the work was just as dangerous. Life for humans in the galaxy had gotten much worse. The Galactic Council, made up of the most powerful alien races, had been making new rules. These rules made it harder for humans to travel between star systems. They cut off access to 12 systems where humans had been trying to build new colonies. Food shipments to human worlds were being delayed or stopped completely. Admiral Lisa Carter was the head of the Human Defense Force. She was a tough woman in her 50s with gray hair and tired eyes. Lisa had been fighting for human rights in the galaxy for 20 years, but lately she felt like she was losing the war. Lisa sat in her office on Luna Station, looking at reports that made her sick to her stomach. Human colonies were running out of food. Trade ships were being turned away from alien ports. Children on the outer colonies were getting sick because medical supplies were not getting through. The door to her office opened, and Colonel Mark Davis walked in. Mark was Amy's older brother, a serious man who ran intelligence for the Defense Force. His face was grim as he handed Lisa a data pad. "Admiral, you need to see this," Mark said. "We intercepted a message between the hegemony worlds. It's encrypted, but our computers finally broke the code." The hegemony was a group of the most powerful alien races in the galaxy. They included with their crystal ships, the vegan empire with their huge fleets, and the raiders who attacked anyone weaker than them. Together, they controlled most of the galaxy's trade and military power. Lisa read the message on the data pad. Her face grew pale as she understood what it meant. "They're calling it the final solution," Mark said quietly. "They want to solve what they call the human problem once and for all." The message was clear. The hegemony leaders had met in secret and decided that humans were becoming too numerous and too unpredictable. Human colonies were spreading too fast. Human traders were competing with alien businesses. Human ideas about freedom and equality were spreading to other races. The plan was simple and horrible. The hegemony would attack 7 major human colonies at the same time. They would destroy the colonies completely, killing everyone on them. This would scare other humans into staying in their own small corner of the galaxy. Any human world that tried to fight back would be destroyed as well. "When?" Lisa asked, her voice barely a whisper. 3 days, Mark replied. "They're calling it Operation Clean Sweep." Lisa stood up and walked to the window of her office. Outside, she could see Earth floating in space, blue and beautiful. It was home to 8 billion humans who had no idea what was coming. "How many people live on those 7 colonies?" she asked. Mark checked his data pad. "About 15 million total. New Detroit has the most with 5 million people. Port Liberty has 3 million. The others are smaller, but they're all full of families, children." Lisa closed her eyes. The Human Defense Force had maybe 200 ships total. Most of them were old and not very powerful. The hegemony had thousands of ships, many of them huge warships that could destroy planets. "We can't stop them," Lisa said. "We don't have enough ships or weapons." "We have to try," Mark said. "We can't just let them murder 15 million people." Lisa turned back to her desk. "Send emergency messages to all the colonies. Tell them to evacuate if they can, and contact every human ship in space. We'll put up a fight, even if we can't win." But it was too late. The hegemony had planned everything perfectly. The attacks came like lightning striking in 7 places at once. The first target was New Detroit, a thriving colony world where humans had built beautiful cities and farms. The hegemony fleet arrived without warning and began firing from orbit. Their energy weapons turned cities into glass and ash. 5 million people died in the first hour. Port Liberty was next. The colony was built on a moon with no atmosphere, so everyone lived in sealed domes and tunnels. When the hegemony ships destroyed the life support systems, 3 million people slowly ran out of air. There was nowhere to run and no way to escape. The mining colony on Harvest Moon simply disappeared. One moment it was there, home to 500,000 miners and their families. The next moment there was nothing but empty space and floating debris. The other colonies tried to fight back, but it was hopeless. The hegemony ships were too strong and too many. By the end of the first day, 7 human worlds were gone. 15 million people were dead. Dr. Karen Blake was humanity's representative to the Galactic Council. She was a small woman with kind eyes who had spent years trying to make peace between humans and aliens. When she heard about the attacks, she rushed to the council chambers and demanded an emergency meeting. "These are innocent people," Karen shouted at the assembled alien leaders. "Families, children, how can you allow this murder to happen?" The representative, a tall being made of living crystal, spoke in a voice like breaking glass. The human population had grown beyond acceptable limits. These colonies were becoming a threat to galactic stability. "They were farmers and miners," Karen said, tears running down her face. "They weren't hurting anyone." The vegan ambassador, a creature that looked like a giant octopus, waved his tentacles dismissively. "Humans reproduce too quickly and spread too far. This action will teach your species to stay within proper boundaries." Karen looked around the chamber at all the alien faces. Some looked ashamed, but none spoke up for humanity. They were all afraid of the hegemony's power. "You're talking about genocide," Karen said quietly. "The murder of entire worlds." "We prefer to call it population management," the general said with what might have been a smile. His face was covered in scars from old battles. "Your species will learn to be more careful about where it tries to expand." Karen stood there in the council chamber, surrounded by aliens who had just approved the murder of 15 million humans. She realized that humanity was alone in the galaxy. No one would help them. No one cared if they lived or died. But Karen was wrong. Someone did remember humanity's kindness. Far away on the warrior world of Zephyr Prime, Commander heard about the attacks on human colonies. He was now Supreme Commander of all forces, a position of great honor among his people. When he learned what the hegemony had done, his golden eyes blazed with anger. Called together his war council, the other commanders were confused. Why should they care about human deaths? Humans were weak, and weakness was not respected among. "You forget the old ways," told them. 2 years ago, humans saved my life and the lives of my crew. Captain Jake Harrison risked his ship and his people to rescue strangers. He asked for nothing in return. "That was one human," said War Leader. "What does that matter now?" Stood up to his full height, nearly 8 feet tall. His blue-gray skin seemed to glow with inner fire. "It matters because honor matters. Because a debt unpaid is a stain on our souls. The humans showed mercy when they could have ignored our distress call. Now the hegemony shows only cruelty." The War Council was silent. Among, honor was more important than life itself. "The blood debt remains unpaid," continued. "And now that debt has grown larger. The hegemony has made alliance with our old enemies, the Empire. They plan to divide the galaxy between them with no room for honor or mercy." War Leader, an old warrior with many scars, nodded slowly. "What do you propose, Supreme Commander?" Walked to the great window that looked out over Zephyr Prime's purple sky. In the distance, the fleet floated in orbit, hundreds of sleek warships ready for battle. "I propose we pay our debt," said, "all of it with interest." That night, encrypted messages went out from Zephyr Prime to worlds across the galaxy. The messages went to races that humans had helped over the years. The Republic, whose diplomats had been saved from a deadly plague by human doctors. The Tau Collective, whose merchant ships had been protected from pirates by human escorts. The Free Traders Alliance, whose children had been rescued from slavers by human marines. The message was simple: the humans need help, who stands with honor. The answers came back quickly. More races than anyone expected remembered human kindness. They remembered being helped when no one else would help them. They remembered that humans treated other races as equals, not as servants or enemies. Admiral Lisa Carter was in her office, trying to figure out how to protect the remaining human colonies, when the first message arrived. It was from Supreme Commander of the Armada. "Admiral Carter," the message said, "2 years ago your people saved my life when honor demanded it. Now honor demands that I return the favor. The blood debt will be paid in full. Prepare your forces. Help is coming." Lisa stared at the message for a long time. She had never met, but she knew the story of Jake Harrison's rescue mission. She had thought it was just a feel-good story that people told to make themselves feel better about humanity's place in the galaxy. Now she realized it might be the thing that saved them all. More messages arrived throughout the night. The Republic was sending their entire fleet. The Tau Collective was mobilizing their defense forces. Even some smaller races that most humans had never heard of were offering to help. By morning, Lisa knew that humanity would not face the hegemony alone. But she also knew that the real war was just beginning. The hegemony would not stop until every human in the galaxy was dead or enslaved. The galaxy had chosen sides. Now they would see which side was stronger. Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of his new ship, the Defiance. It was the biggest and most powerful ship humans had ever built, but Jake still missed his old mining vessel. The Reliance had been simple and honest. The Defiance was a warship built for killing, and Jake hated what that meant. 3 months had passed since the hegemony attacked the human colonies. Jake was now an admiral, though he never wanted the job. The old admirals were dead, killed when the hegemony destroyed the Defense Force headquarters on Mars. Lisa Carter had survived, but she was badly hurt and could not command the fleet anymore. "Admiral, you need to see this," said Captain Sam. Sam had been Jake's engineer on the Reliance 2 years ago. Now he was Jake's tactical officer and closest friend. He was a short, stocky man with black hair and worried eyes. Jake walked over to Sam's station. On the screen was a sight that Jake could hardly believe. Ships were arriving at the meeting point near Jupiter's moons. Lots of ships. More ships than Jake had ever seen in one place. There were the warships, sleek and deadly like silver knives. The Republic had sent their golden fleet, each ship looking like a work of art. The Tau Collective's vessels were strange and angular, covered in sensor arrays and communication equipment. But there were others too. Ships from races Jake had never heard of. Small patrol boats from the Mineral Workers Union. Transport ships from the Free Traders Alliance that had been converted into makeshift warships. Even some pirates had shown up, claiming they owed humans a debt for fair treatment. "How many?" Jake asked quietly. Sam checked his instruments. "Over 1,000 ships, Admiral, maybe 1,200, and more are still arriving." Jake shook his head in amazement. 2 years ago, he had been a nobody mining captain trying to make enough money to keep his ship running. Now he was commanding the largest fleet in human history, and it was made up mostly of aliens. The communication system beeped, and Supreme Commander's face appeared on the main screen. The looked older than Jake remembered, with new scars on his blue-gray skin, but his golden eyes still burned with the same fierce honor. "Admiral Harrison," said in his deep voice, "it is good to see you again, my friend." "Commander," Jake replied, "I never expected to see you again, and I certainly never expected this." He gestured at the fleet displayed on his screens. Jake's expression grew serious. "The debt must be paid, Admiral, but this is more than just debt now. The hegemony has grown too powerful. They think they can decide who lives and who dies in this galaxy. They are wrong." Another face appeared on the screen, Ambassador Tal of the Republic. She was beautiful in an alien way, with silver skin and large blue eyes. "Admiral Harrison, my people remember when your doctors saved our diplomatic mission from the Red Plague. 43 of our finest leaders would have died without human help." A third face joined them, Captain Vex of the Tau Collective. He looked like a giant insect with multiple eyes and clicking mandibles. "Human merchants protected our trade ships when the pirates attacked the Outer Rim. My own daughter was on one of those ships. We do not forget." Jake listened as more and more alien leaders told their stories. Every one of them had been helped by humans at some point. A rescue mission here, medical aid there, protection from pirates, help during natural disasters. Small acts of kindness that humans had done without thinking about payment or reward. "We never asked for anything in return," Jake said when they finished speaking. "That is exactly why we are here," replied. "Honor means nothing if it is bought and paid for. True honor comes from helping those who cannot help themselves and asking for nothing back." Captain pulled Jake aside and spoke quietly. "Admiral, this is incredible, but we have a problem. These ships don't work together. They use different languages, different tactics, different technologies. How do we coordinate an attack with all these different species?" Jake looked out at the massive fleet surrounding them. Sam was right. It was one thing to have all these ships show up. It was another thing entirely to make them work as a team. "We'll figure it out," Jake said. "We have to." Over the next few days, Jake worked harder than he had ever worked in his life. The fleet commanders met constantly, trying to find ways to coordinate their forces. The wanted to charge straight at the enemy and fight with honor. The preferred careful planning and precise strikes. The Tau Collective wanted to use electronic warfare to disable enemy ships. Meanwhile, the human crews worked day and night to establish communication links between all the different ships. Amy Davis, now a commander herself, led teams of translators and technicians who created universal communication protocols. Dr. Hayes, the old doctor from the Reliance, found herself treating wounded aliens who had been hurt in the hegemony attacks. She learned alien medicine by trial and error, saving lives and earning respect from species who had never trusted humans before. But the biggest challenge was intelligence gathering. They needed to know where the hegemony fleet was and what they were planning. That job fell to Colonel Mark Davis and his team of human spies. Mark had been working around the clock to gather information. He came to Jake's quarters late one night, looking exhausted and worried. "Admiral, we have a problem," Mark said. "The hegemony knows about our fleet. Their spies have been watching us gather here." Jake felt his stomach drop. "How much do they know?" "Everything. Ship numbers, species involved, even some of our battle plans. They think we're just a bunch of different races who can't work together. They're planning to crush us before we can organize properly." Jake walked to the window of his quarters and looked out at the fleet. The ships floated in space like a swarm of fireflies, each one representing thousands of lives depending on his decisions. "What's their plan?" Jake asked. Mark activated a holographic display showing the local star systems. "They're bringing their main fleet here, to Titan's Gate. It's a narrow passage between two nebulae. If they control it, they can cut off our supply lines and pick us apart piece by piece." "How many ships do they have?" 1,200 confirmed, maybe more. And these aren't converted merchants or patrol boats, Admiral. These are frontline warships with experienced crews." Jake studied the tactical display. Titan's Gate was a perfect place for a battle if you were the defender. The attacker would have to come through a narrow space where the enemy could concentrate their fire. But if the hegemony got there first, they would be the defenders. "When do they arrive?" Jake asked. 3 days, maybe less. Jake made his decision. Send word to all ship commanders. We're moving out in 12 hours. We're going to Titan's Gate and we're going to get there first. Mark looked surprised. Admiral, the fleet isn't ready. We haven't finished coordinating communications. We don't have integrated battle plans. Half the species involved have never fought alongside each other before. Then we'll learn as we go, Jake said. The alternative is letting the hegemony pick the time and place for the battle. I won't give them that advantage. The next morning, the largest fleet in galactic history began moving toward Titan's Gate. Over 1,200 ships from dozens of different species, all following a human admiral who 2 years ago had been just a mining captain. As they traveled through hyperspace, Jake thought about Commander's words about honor and debt. That was right. This was about more than just paying back a favor. This was about deciding what kind of galaxy they all wanted to live in. The hegemony believed that might made right, that the strong should rule over the weak. They thought they could murder millions of innocent people, and the rest of the galaxy would just accept it. But Jake knew something the hegemony didn't understand. Humans had learned long ago that the best way to be strong was to help others become strong too. Every alien in this fleet was here because humans had helped them when they needed it most. 2 days later, the fleet arrived at Titan's Gate. Jake stood on the bridge of the Defiance and watched as his ships took defensive positions in the narrow passage. The warships formed the front line, their silver hulls gleaming in the light of distant stars. Behind them, the ships prepared their precision weapons. The Tau collective vessels powered up their electronic warfare systems. And scattered throughout the formation were human ships, old, battered, outnumbered, but crewed by people who refused to give up. Admiral, Sam said quietly, long-range sensors are picking up the hegemony fleet. They'll be here in 6 hours. Jake nodded. Send a message to all ships. Tell them to get some rest while they can. Tomorrow we find out if friendship is stronger than fear. As Jake looked out at his incredible fleet, he thought about a conversation he'd had with earlier that day. The commander had asked him if he was afraid. Terrified, Jake had answered honestly. Good, had replied. Only fools are not afraid before battle. But remember, Admiral, we are not here because we hate the hegemony. We are here because we love something more than we fear them. Now, as Jake watched the stars and waited for the battle that would decide the fate of the galaxy, he understood what meant. The hegemony fought for power and control. The Alliance fought for something much more important. They fought for the idea that kindness mattered, that helping strangers was worth risking your life, that the strong had a duty to protect the weak. In a few hours, they would find out if that was enough. The Battle of Titan's Gate began at dawn, though there was no sun in the empty space between the nebulae. Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching as 1,200 enemy ships emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of angry wasps. The hegemony fleet was beautiful and terrible. Their ships were massive, each one the size of a small city. The crystal vessels sparkled like diamonds. The vegan empire's bioships looked like living creatures with tentacles and organic hulls. The warships were dark and brutal, covered in weapons and armor. All ships, this is Admiral Harrison, Jake said into his communicator. Remember why we're here. We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every innocent person in the galaxy who can't fight back. The response came from over 1,000 ships in dozens of languages, but the meaning was the same. They were ready. The hegemony commander was General Moore of the Empire. He was a cruel warrior who had destroyed many worlds in his long career. His flagship, the Bone Crusher, was the largest ship Jake had ever seen. It bristled with weapons that could crack planets in half. Humans and their pets, Moore's voice crackled over the communication channels. You think this rabble can stand against the might of the hegemony? We will crush you like insects and finish what we started with your pathetic colonies. Jake didn't reply. He had learned long ago that bullies expected fear, and he wouldn't give them the satisfaction. The first shots came from the hegemony's long-range weapons. Beams of energy lanced across space, striking the Alliance's forward ships. 3 vessels exploded immediately, their crews vaporized in seconds. "Return fire," Jake ordered. The Alliance fleet responded with everything they had. Plasma cannons lit up the darkness. Precision lasers found weak spots in enemy armor. Tau collective ships launched electronic attacks that scrambled enemy sensors. But the hegemony ships were stronger and better armed. For every enemy ship that was destroyed, the Alliance lost 3 of their own. Supreme Commander's ship, was leading the charge. Jake watched on his screens as the proud warship fought like a cornered lion, its weapons blazing. But the hegemony had focused their attack on, recognizing him as the Alliance's spiritual leader. "Admiral," Captain Sam called out, "the is taking heavy damage. Shields are failing." Jake felt his heart sink. Without, the Alliance would fall apart. The commander was the one who had brought all these different species together. He was the symbol of honor that held them united. "All ships protect the," Jake ordered. But it was too late. General Moore's flagship had locked its main weapons on ship. The Bone Crusher's massive guns charged up, preparing to deliver a killing blow. That's when something happened that no one expected. The human ship Guardian, commanded by Captain Tony, suddenly accelerated toward the hegemony flagship. Tony was young, barely 25, and had only been a captain for 6 months. "Tony, what are you doing?" Jake shouted into his communicator. "What needs to be done, Admiral," Tony replied calmly. "Tell my mom I love her." The Guardian was a small ship compared to the Bone Crusher, but Tony aimed it directly at the enemy flagship's main weapon array. The ship tried to turn away, but it was too large and slow to avoid the collision. The Guardian struck the Bone Crusher at full speed. The explosion lit up space like a new star, destroying both ships instantly. Tony and his crew of 200 died in that moment, but their sacrifice saved and crippled the enemy's most powerful weapon. The sight of the young human captain's heroic death sent a wave of fury through the Alliance fleet. Ships that had been retreating turned and charged back into battle. The roared ancient war cries. The ships moved with deadly precision. Even the smallest vessels fought with desperate courage. But the battle was still going badly. The Alliance had lost half their ships, while the hegemony fleet was still mostly intact. Jake knew they were losing, but he refused to retreat. Too many people had died already. Too many sacrifices had been made. "Admiral," Dr. Foster called from the science station, was a quiet physicist who rarely spoke during battles. She had been working on experimental weapons for the past year, projects that most people thought were impossible. "What is it?" Jake asked. "I have an idea, but it's dangerous. Very dangerous. My gravity pulse weapon is ready for testing, but I don't know what will happen when we use it." Jake looked at the tactical display. The Alliance was down to 600 ships. The hegemony still had over 800. They needed a miracle. "What does it do?" Jake asked. His hands shook as she worked at her controls. "It creates a small black hole that lasts for about 10 seconds. Anything caught in its gravity field gets pulled in and destroyed. But I don't know how big the field will be or if we can control it." "Will it hurt our ships?" "I don't know," admitted. "This is the first time anyone has tried to weaponize gravity itself." Jake made the hardest decision of his life. Do it. His fingers danced over her controls. Deep in the Defiance's hull, strange machinery hummed to life. The weapon had taken 2 years to build and use technology that even didn't fully understand. "Firing gravity pulse," announced. Nothing seemed to happen at first. Then space itself began to twist near the center of the hegemony fleet. Reality bent and warped as the artificial black hole came to life. The effect was immediate and terrifying. Enemy ships were pulled toward the gravity well like leaves in a hurricane. The massive vegan bioships screamed as they were stretched apart by tidal forces. Crystal vessels shattered like glass. Warships, built to survive anything, crumpled like paper. In 10 seconds, over 300 enemy ships were gone. Simply gone, pulled into the artificial black hole and crushed out of existence. The remaining hegemony ships panicked. They had never seen anything like this weapon. Some tried to run. Others fired wildly at targets they couldn't see. Their perfect formation collapsed into chaos. "All ships advance," Jake ordered. The Alliance fleet surged forward, pressing their advantage. The battle became a rout as enemy ships fled in all directions. Some escaped into hyperspace. Others surrendered. Many more were destroyed by the Alliance forces that had seemed beaten just minutes before. General Moore was dead, killed when the Guardian destroyed his flagship. The hegemony's other commanders fought each other for control instead of working together. Within hours, their mighty fleet was scattered across a dozen star systems. But the victory came at a terrible price. The Alliance had lost over 500 ships and hundreds of thousands of brave people. The space around Titan's Gate was filled with debris and the bodies of the fallen. Jake stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the rescue ships searching for survivors. He felt tired and old, even though he was only 35. War aged people in ways that time never could. Supreme Commander's image appeared on the main screen. The looked battered and wounded, but his golden eyes still burned with pride. "The debt is paid," Admiral Harrison said quietly. "Paid in blood and fire as honor demanded." "At too high a cost," Jake replied. "Too many good people died today." "Yes," agreed. "But their deaths were not in vain. Today we proved that the strong do not always win. Today we showed the galaxy that kindness is not weakness, that mercy is not foolishness." Over the next few hours, reports came in from across the galaxy. The hegemony's member species were in chaos. Some were fighting civil wars as different factions blamed each other for the defeat. Others were begging the Alliance for mercy. The Empire, facing rebellion from its own people, surrendered completely within a week. The survivors of their fleet limped home to find their government overthrown by citizens who were tired of endless war. Dr. Corinne Blake, humanity's representative to the Galactic Council, sent a message from the council chambers. The alien leaders who had approved the genocide of human colonies were now falling over themselves to apologize and offer reparations. "The Council is voting to disband the hegemony and establish a new governing body," Corinne reported. "They want humans to have a permanent seat on the Supreme Council." Jake smiled grimly. It was ironic. 2 years ago, humans had been nobody important. Now they were being offered leadership of the galaxy because they had proven they could destroy it. But Jake knew the real victory wasn't the battle or the political changes that would follow. The real victory was that 15 million innocent people had been avenged. The bullies who thought they could murder anyone weaker than themselves had learned that some debts always get paid. As the Alliance fleet began the long journey home, Jake thought about Tony and all the other heroes who had died at Titan's Gate. They had paid the ultimate price to prove that right was stronger than might, that love was more powerful than fear. The debt was indeed paid in full, and the galaxy would never be the same. 5 years had passed since the Battle of Titan's Gate. Fleet Admiral Jake Harrison stood on the observation deck of Memorial Station, watching ships from dozens of different species patrol the system. The galaxy looked very different now. The Memorial Station floated in the exact spot where the battle had taken place. It was built from pieces of destroyed ships. Both Alliance and enemy vessels melted together into something beautiful and sad. The walls were covered with names in every language imaginable. Human names, and many others. All the people who had died to make the galaxy a better place. At the center of the memorial was a golden plaque with Supreme Commander's name written in flowing script. Below it were the names of Tony and his crew from the Guardian. Jake visited their names every time he came here, which was often. "The delegation has arrived, Admiral," said Captain Lisa Park. Lisa was Jake's aide, a young woman with bright eyes who reminded him a little of Amy Davis. Amy was now Admiral Davis, commanding her own fleet from Earth. Jake turned away from the memorial wall. "How do they look?" "Nervous," Lisa replied with a small smile. "Very nervous." Jake walked to the docking bay where the delegation was waiting. 5 years ago, they had been humanity's worst enemies. They had joined the hegemony's plan to destroy human colonies. Now they were here to ask for forgiveness and permission to trade with human worlds. The leader was General, a warrior who had once served under the dead General Moore. But something had changed in him. His eyes, which once burned with cruelty, now held something that looked almost like shame. "Admiral Harrison," said, bowing his head, "I come before you not as a conqueror but as one who seeks to make things right." Jake studied the alien warrior. They were still dangerous, but their empire had collapsed after the war. Their people were starving because no one would trade with them. Their military was broken and scattered. "What do you want, General?" Jake asked. "Permission to establish a trade embassy on Mars," replied. "My people need food and medicine. We offer rare minerals and our knowledge of deep space navigation." Jake was quiet for a long moment. Part of him wanted to turn them away. They had helped murder 15 million innocent humans, but another part of him remembered what this war had really been about. It wasn't about revenge. It was about building a galaxy where everyone could live in peace. "The families of the victims must approve any trade agreement," Jake said finally, "and you will contribute to the memorial fund for 50 years, 1% of all trade profits." Nodded quickly. "Agreed. We also offer military service to the Alliance fleet. Our ships will patrol the outer systems and protect trade routes." Jake raised an eyebrow. "You would fight for the same alliance you once tried to destroy." "Honor demands it," replied, using words that sounded strange coming from a mouth. "We have learned much from thee about what honor really means." Later that day, Jake met with Ambassador in the station's council chambers. Was humanity's representative to the new Galactic Alliance, the organization that had replaced the old council after the war. She was a smart woman with gray hair and kind eyes who had once been a school teacher. "The trade agreement with thee is just the beginning," told Jake as they looked out at the busy space lanes around the memorial. "Every week, more species are asking to join the Alliance. The hegemony's old empire is falling apart, and everyone wants to be on our side now." Jake watched a convoy of merchant ships pass by the station. They were protected by Alliance warships from 6 different species, all working together. It was something that would have been impossible before the war. "Are we doing the right thing?" Jake asked, "letting former enemies join us so easily?" Smiled. "You tell me, Admiral. You're the one who started all this by rescuing a ship 5 years ago." Jake thought about that day in the asteroid belt. It seemed like a lifetime ago. He had been a simple mining captain worried about fuel costs and quotas. Now he commanded the most powerful fleet in galactic history. "I've been thinking about retiring," Jake said quietly. "Going back to civilian life, maybe teaching at the academy." "The galaxy needs you," Jake replied. "You're the symbol of what we're trying to build here, a place where strength is used to protect, not to conquer." A soft chime indicated that someone was requesting permission to enter the council chambers. A young officer walked in and saluted. His name was grandson of the old war leader who had served under. "Admiral Harrison," said in accented but clear English, "I bring greetings from Zephyr Prime. My grandfather wishes you to know that the new class of warriors has completed their training." "What kind of training?" Jake asked. "They have learned the human concepts of mercy and compassion, alongside traditional honor, replied. My grandfather says that true warriors must know when not to fight as well as when to fight. Jake felt a surge of pride. They were one of the galaxy's most warrior-like races, and they were teaching their children human values. It was proof that the sacrifices made at Titan's Gate had not been in vain. Tell your grandfather that I am honored, Jake said, and tell him that would be proud. After the young left, Jake and returned to watching the ships outside. A human transport was docking with a medical vessel. Tau collective researchers were meeting with human scientists. Former enemies were becoming friends and allies. You know what the best part is, said as they watched the peaceful activity around the station. None of these people are here because they're afraid of us. They're here because they want to be. Jake nodded. That was the real victory, not the battle itself, but what came after. The galaxy had learned that humans didn't fight for conquest or revenge. They fought to protect the innocent and help others. The communication system beeped, and Dr. Foster's face appeared on the screen. Was now director of the Alliance Research Institute, working on new technologies that could be used for exploration and peaceful purposes instead of war. Admiral, I have the final report on the gravity weapon, said. Her face was serious. We've decided to destroy all the research data and dismantle the remaining prototypes. Jake was surprised. Why? That weapon won the war for us. Because it's too dangerous, replied. A weapon that can destroy hundreds of ships in seconds is too tempting. Someone might be tempted to use it on planets instead of ships. The galaxy is safer without it. Jake smiled. Even now, 5 years after their victory, humans were still thinking about what was right instead of what was powerful. As the day ended, Jake found himself back at the memorial wall. He stood before Force's name and spoke quietly, as if the old commander could still hear him. You were right, old friend. The debt has been paid. But more than that, we've built something worth fighting for. A galaxy where helping strangers isn't seen as weakness, where mercy is valued as much as strength. A young human girl walked up to Jake, tugging on her mother's hand. The mother was a refugee from one of the destroyed colonies, now living on a new world that the Alliance had helped her settle. Mommy, is that the Admiral who saved everyone? The little girl whispered. Her mother smiled and nodded. Yes, sweetie, that's Admiral Harrison. The girl looked up at Jake with wide eyes. Thank you for saving my mommy, she said simply. Jake knelt down to the girl's level. You're welcome, he said. But remember, it wasn't just me. It was everyone working together. Humans and aliens, all of us helping each other. As Jake watched the little girl and her mother walk away, he thought about the future. The galaxy still had problems. There were still pirates and raiders. Some species still didn't trust each other. But now there was hope. The Alliance was growing stronger every day. New worlds were joining. Old enemies were becoming friends. Children like that little girl would grow up in a galaxy where species helped each other instead of fighting. Jake looked one more time at the memorial wall, at all the names of the people who had died to make this possible. Tony, who had sacrificed his life to save. Team members who had died testing the gravity weapon. Thousands of brave souls from dozens of species who had chosen to fight for what was right. We did it, Jake whispered to the names on the wall. We actually did it. Outside the memorial station, ships continued to pass by. Human vessels alongside alien ones, all flying the flag of the Alliance. All working together to explore new worlds, protect trade routes, and help anyone who needed it. The message that played every hour from the station's transmitters echoed through space. In memory of those who stood together when standing alone meant death. In honor of those who paid the price for freedom. In recognition that some debts can only be paid in blood. But Jake knew there was another message hidden in those words. A message about the power of kindness, the strength that came from helping others, and the truth that humans had learned long ago. The best way to be strong was to help others become strong too. The debt had been paid in full, but the galaxy's real treasure was not the payment itself. It was the lesson that had been learned, a lesson that would be remembered for generations to come. Never underestimate those who choose mercy over cruelty, hope over fear, and love over hate. They might just change the universe.